Abraham Lincoln moved to Springfield, Illinois in the spring of 1837, the year it became the state capital, something that Lincoln had played a role in as a freshman member of the Illinois state legislature. Springfield was a promising town then of 2,500 people when it became the state capital, but it became quickly the focal point of law, politics, and state government in Illinois. Yet, livestock freely roamed its muddy streets. When Lincoln was elected to the presidency in 1860, some 23 years later, the hogs were gone from its streets, and its population was just under 10,000. In a new neighborhood at the edge of this bustling capital city, the Lincoln home was only a few blocks from Lincoln's law office at the town square near the old state capitol, courts, stores, and businesses. Lincoln's neighbors represented a cross-section of society, from laborers up to elected officials. All in all, this was an excellent location for a promising young Springfield attorney and his growing family. While no one knows exactly what Springfield was like in 1860, this carefully researched illustration suggests its appearance then. The Lincoln home was nestled in a heavily developed neighborhood. By the time the Lincolns left Springfield in February 1861, there were houses all along 8th Street where the Lincolns lived, and the yards were filled with barns, sheds, and gardens. Today, the remaining houses and outbuildings offer only a glimpse of what this lively neighborhood was like when the Lincolns lived here. While living in this house, Lincoln enjoyed great success as a lawyer and was considered one of the state of Illinois' best courtroom attorneys. His legal practice regularly took Lincoln away from Springfield up to 3 months at a time in the spring and the same in the fall. Their children, their 4 boys, certainly made this house a lively place, but Mary Todd Lincoln often felt alone without her husband present at home. Abraham and Mary Lincoln needed more living space for their growing family and decided to buy a house. They had lived temporarily in the Globe Tavern after their marriage, where their first and oldest child, Robert Todd, had been born in 1843. It was this birth of their first child and a growing family that they expected necessitated the move out of the tavern into a real home. They selected a Greek revival-style cottage, seen here at the corner of 8th and Jackson Streets, owned by the Reverend Charles Dresser, who had married the Lincolns in 1842. Lincoln paid $1,500 for the home that the family would occupy for the next 17 years. Over the years, the Lincoln enlarged the house to accommodate their growing family. Most dramatic were the improvements made during the years 1855 and 1856, when the Lincolns expanded the story-and-a-half cottage to a full 2-story house. This substantial home became the center of national attention during Abraham Lincoln's 1860 presidential campaign. Only a simple nameplate on the front door reading A. Lincoln told visitors that they had arrived at the home of the future President of the United States. After the election, the Lincolns gave way or sold most of their furnishings and arranged to rent the house to Lucian Tilton, the president of the Great Western Railroad in Springfield, Illinois. The Tiltons regularly indulged curious visitors with tours of President Lincoln's home while the Lincolns were in Washington, D.C. They rented out this house to the Tiltons, sold most of their household furnishings, and only stored a little bit in anticipation of their return to Springfield once Lincoln had completed either his term in the White House or, he had hoped, a couple terms in the White House. Before leaving Springfield for Washington, D.C., on February 11, 1861, the Lincolns went to the Great Western Railroad Depot for their departure. They had only expected to be accompanied by a few close friends, but most of Springfield turned out to say goodbye to the city and the capital's most known citizens. As they left, Lincoln decided to give a farewell address, an impromptu speech, where he summed up his life in Springfield to the crowd who had gathered at the station with some simple words. Here he said, "I have lived a quarter of a century and have passed from a young to an old man. Here my children have been born and one is buried. I now leave not knowing when or whether ever I may return." It was to this place, Springfield, and the kindness of these people that Lincoln said he owed everything. Inside the home of the Lincolns, you are introduced to the parlor. This is where the Lincolns entertained guests in the parlor, the most formal and public room in the home. This was the setting for an important event in the future president's political life. The 1860 Republican Party convention, held in Chicago in the northeastern section of the state, chose Lincoln as its candidate for president. The very next day, a committee traveled down to Springfield by train, and it was in this room they formally notified Abraham Lincoln of his nomination as their party, the Republican Party's presidential candidate, in 1860. This is the kitchen. Mary Todd Lincoln largely devoted herself to managing the household and raising their children. Much of this domestic and private side of the home centered on the kitchen. Here, Mary oversaw the activities that made this a well-run and inviting home, allowing Lincoln to devote his time and energy to the practice of law and politics. In the Lincoln's bedroom suite, Lincoln frequently worked at home on both his legal and political careers. Although the parents' bedroom suite was in the private part of the house and seen by few outside the family, Mary chose the furnishings with care to reflect the taste of a prosperous family. In the boys' bedroom, this is their bedroom. By 1860, the oldest son, Robert, was away at school. The two younger sons, mischievous boys, Willie Wallace Lincoln and Thomas Tad Lincoln, shared this bedroom. Lincoln's law partner, William Herndon, said that Lincoln, quote, worshipped his children and what they worshipped. He loved what they loved and hated what they hated. This is Fido, the family dog, who the Lincolns would leave with friends in Springfield while they moved to Washington, D.C. The Lincoln home is preserved by the National Park Service, as is a community that would have been representative of the time that the Lincolns lived in Springfield, Illinois, at about the time of 1861, right before they left for Washington, D.C.